This computer. All right, we're going. Okay. So we're here with Bence, and we're gonna talk about poetry. So we have pretty different styles. Like you're a very Christian poet, obviously. Um, and I wouldn't say I'm a Christian poet per se. I've been looking into more Christian thinking recently. I've listened to a few podcasts that were very interesting recently about the prophets and about the use of land in the Old Testament. Um, but that's beside the point. I want to ask if um, specific books of the Bible have been more inspiring for you than others, and where those sources of inspiration come from for you.
Yeah, quite the loaded question.
It is a loaded question.
I'll answer the first one, and I'll see.
Yeah.
You'll have to tell me to shut up when it comes to all my other sources. But when it comes to the Bible, I kind of have I kind of read it with a dual perspective. Obviously, the primary reason that I read the Bible is not for artistic drive. It is because it's what I believe in, and I want to kind of consume that which I think is, the literal word of God that I have access to every morning, which
Okay.
I'm very
Absolutely. Yeah.
grateful for. And so obviously I have a routine where I'll read the Bible in Hungarian in the morning, and then I'll read it in English in the night. And I actually just finished it not long ago. And this will tie into your question quite nicely, because I finished the complete Bible from Genesis to Revelation
Oh wow.
in the King James version.
Okay.
And I liked it, but I wanted for my next read through, because all I'm doing is really I'm just going round in circles till the day I die, essentially.
Yeah.
Um, and so I restarted. What is it? It must have been a couple of months ago. I restarted, and I am reading the revised version with Apocrypha, which I
Okay.
haven't read. I haven't actually consumed the Apocrypha yet, so I want to do that. But it's the 1895 version, which I thought I was reading it, and even though, like I said, I didn't come into it with this artistic pursuit where it's like I want to read this so that I can write about it. I'm obviously here. I want to read about it so that my faith and my belief is strengthened, and so that I can grapple with these ideas, which I always do. And and I was reading the first chapter of Genesis in this revised version, and it was beautiful. The translation was, in my opinion, a lot more beautiful than the King James version. I mean, there was a line. I'm not one of those people who will cite Bible verses off the top of their head. I've not read the Bible long enough for that. But
Okay. Yeah.
there's this line about the rivers in Eden, and I was like, my goodness, this is absolutely beautiful. And so with the Bible, because I read it every day, it's almost like a permanent source. So it's
Hmm.
almost like I said, I read it for the faith, but obviously when I sit down to write, it's still there because I have read it in the morning, and maybe I read it in the night, and then I'm going to go and write. And so it's pretty much always in my head.
That's
So,
wonderful. Yeah.
but when it comes to specific books, I think you're right. Yeah. All of the books I value greatly, and I think I learn a lot of them because I'm actually a relatively new believer.
Okay.
When I think about it, I've been 1,000 days ish. I've been Christian, sorry, and so I'm relatively new. So I value every line in the Bible is very important for me because I still want to learn. I still have a lot of questions as well. So it's why it's good that I'm in a worship community, also in church. But
Absolutely.
yeah, there are certain books that aren't that useful for me creatively. So I always go back. I mean, I like to maintain that tone. So I love the book of Ezekiel. I love
Okay.
that. I love the book of Daniel. I think the book of Daniel is really really good. And I also like the book of Isaiah and Jeremiah. So honestly, they are very very close in proximity and tone. But it's
Hmm.
always it's a great pleasure for me to read. And like I said, because it's always in my head, the Bible, and the system is designed that way so that I want to be a Christian poet, and I always have the Bible in my head when I'm writing, even if it doesn't always seem like it with the poetry, which I know is a little bit unorthodox in the Christian sense. But those are books that I value greatly. And then even from the New Testament, I was obviously with Revelations, it's like it's a given because it's so deep and there's so much to unpack. And that's also something I want to bring into my poetry also. So that's
Yes.
obviously a natural. But then even the Gospel of John, and I think it is Paul's letter to the Romans, which are also very, very important for me when I'm writing, also because I think the New Testament, like I said on Ian's podcast, it has, and I do, and I'm not agnostic, so I do believe that it's the same God throughout the Old and New Testament. But I do think there is, like I said, I still hold to that in the New Testament there is a greater call, in my opinion, to listen. And not that that isn't. I mean, obviously the Mosaic books in the Bible are very, very heavy on law and stuff, and so it is stuff that you have to listen to. But for me, there's this kind of the presence of Jesus is just so different in the New Testament, and you get like, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's beautiful how the Bible transitions. That's why if I were to make a course, a literature course for poets, I would definitely select a couple of books of the Bible, as many poetry courses have done, prestigious poetry courses have done. I mean, in Harvard, even in Oxford and Cambridge, the Bible is a given. In my third year of university, I'll hopefully be able to do a course on Revelations, for example. So it is a book that
Okay.
you can't really escape. But yeah, I would say those books are definitely way more important for me artistically. And I mean, they just stand out. Like it's stuff that remains with me. Like the couple lines in Ezekiel always, like when the description of how God is going to come down and bring with him all this kind of energy. It's very, very different, but it impacts me greatly. Is what I want to say. And obviously, I'm as all writers, I think I'm great. I'm very sensitive, so I am very emotional. That doesn't mean that I cry a lot, but it just means that I do feel very deeply, and I like to feel extreme emotion.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm not into the whole vanilla thing, when it comes to emotion. Even when I was in love, 3 years ago, I'm still in love with the same woman, for example. So all things I do, I tend to always get, and it's something how I was raised, where whatever you do, it has to be 120%, never 100. You always have to be really, really driven, keep going all the way, exhaust yourself. So for me, these kind of things, because I like to feel a lot, it impacts me a lot. And I get that because it's also nice that after I read these books of the Bible, I pray immediately after. And so that also impacts me a lot as well. And so I have gone into numerous kind of ecstatic and really kind of low points in my prayer, which have just been greatly cathartic sometimes. And I just feel kind of blessed that there is always, God for me to talk to and kind of release all of my emotions, which is how I pray. I really like the kind of Methodist preacher Wesley, John and Charles Wesley. Apart from them being brilliant hymn writers, I
Okay.
think they write some of the most fantastic hymns that exist. Because obviously I'm a Protestant myself, but I really love Wesley's hymnals, but also what they were saying about how there needs to be a kind of fire and a kind of emotion and a passion when it comes to prayer. That's also how I pray. But like I said, it's very easy for me to be impacted greatly. And like I said, I've heard most of this stuff. Like I
Yeah.
was raised in Hungary. A very Christian country. I pretty much know all of this. But when Jesus is betrayed by Judas, it still brings me down a lot, right? It still makes me very, very sad, and I still feel really powerfully about all of this. And so that'll be my. I'll put an end to my kind of inspirations from the Bible. But you asked about sources. I've got some of my most important books with me here, which because I don't bring all of my books down to university because I don't have a lot of space.
Yes.
But I only bring the most important ones down. Blood Meridian by Cormac
Absolutely.
McCarthy, William Shakespeare Macbeth,
Okay.
and the complete poems of William Blake.
William
Uh,
Blake. Okay.
this trinity kind of completes me. But if I had to add someone, it's obviously going to be Ezra Pound, the Cantos,
Yes.
which
Yes.
I finished last semester, and it was incredible. Although it's a challenge, that's why I liked it. It was an experience. I've never
Mhm.
read a poetry collection that was an experience before, and obviously I haven't actually read full poetry collections, front end to back end. I haven't read a lot of them. I would say the Cantos is one of the few ones that I've read front to back. Canto one to the final canto, let the wind speak. I've tried to make paradise. Do not move. That is paradise. My so powerful, so powerful. I love the cantos. For all its kind of problematic stuff, it's just it's and that stuff that stuff makes it hard. That stuff was when it gets to talk about usury and the kind of anti-Semitism, that's the stuff where it's like, okay, do I give up? Do I not turn a page? Because this guy's obviously he's got a lot of hate in him, but then we'll go to another canto. And I always just kind of feel sad when I was reading it because I was like, there's this guy who is able to write such beautiful poetry. I mean, Canto number 4 stays with me quite a lot because I listen to it. I listen to it as a parent,
Okay.
reciting it sometimes on my way back from the gym. And, you know, the pale foot alternate with the hoof, it's like, oh, the pale ankle bones moving through the dark grass. It's like, oh, so beautiful, so
Yeah.
beautiful.
Hmm.
And then also, not a lot of people will know this one, but it's called Attila, and it's by a Spanish author called Alyosha Cole. And this is a very difficult book. I really don't recommend it for everyone. It's essentially like Ulysses on crack. I've actually read a little bit of Ulysses. Because I'm going to get more involved in James Joyce,
Yes,
and
me too.
I've because I'm studying portrait of the artist as a young man. I found it brilliant, which led me to come into conflict with my class, my modernism class, but that's another topic. Um, and a lot of people are like, Bence, you want to go deeper into Joyce, you got to read Dubliners next, ease yourself. No, fuck that. I'm going to straight into Ulysses.
You have to go to
I might even
Ulysses.
skip. I might even skip Ulysses and go to the Wake, the
Go to the
Wake.
lake, river run past Eve and Adam. Yeah, that's the stuff.
There you go. I don't much care for the warm up. For all I know, every time I go to bed, I die. So I have to read good literature, which is
Oh, for
also why
sure.
I've kind of 180 degreed myself on the kind of takedown articles that I had a great pleasure in thinking of. It's like, ooh, I know what I'll do. I'll write a takedown article on an author I do not like. you know, Loser shit. Honestly, like it's loser shit. Now, that's how I see it. I think there are really good people on, for example, even on Substack who can not necessarily take down, but kind of explain why certain pieces of art don't work. I think that's valuable. But unfortunately, like I said, I feel greatly about certain stuff. So when I don't like something, I kind of hate it, and when I like something, I love it. There's not much in between. I don't. It's not a lot of nuance. Um, I mean, I guess there are some books to which I'm like, meh, whatever. There's a
Yeah.
couple of Shakespeare plays like that. Ovid is a little bit like that, although he gets beautiful sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the grandeur of your emotions really comes across in your poetry. Um, it's obvious looking at it, and just the deep feeling. I think that's almost a hallmark of being a great poet. Um, and I'd like to talk about, I haven't read much Ezra Pound, but you bring up an interesting point about his, problematic ideas. And it's a lot of complexity within his work. And we have a lot of artists, if you observe, great creators through time, who were not great people. Um, and I've been pondering that myself, looking at the Renaissance painters and the Baroque painters. if you look like Caravaggio or Bernini, they weren't great people. They were pretty awful. Um, and you have to look at them and wonder if complexity as a human is from where great art arises. We can even look at Cormac McCarthy. Like, you're not going to get an incredible piece of art from a person who's straightforward and simple. Um, and I think a lot of that has to do with emotions that are so grand. So maybe you can be a little more controversial and you have it in you, Bence. But what do you think about that? How do you feel about the author's um, personality versus their work?
Yeah, it is a very interesting point. I mean, you listed kind of like half of the people that I love. Like Cormac McCarthy. I'll be the first one to say I love his work, but he can't like he disappointed me greatly. But at the same time, I was expecting that to be like do you wrote Blood Meridian and Child of God? Something wrong there.
Yes.
um, and that's and like a lot of people have written stuff which is really eerie and grotesque
Hmm.
and haven't really nonced on children. If I'll put it plainly.
It's not a
Uh,
prerequisite to making great art. That's for sure.
no, yeah, no, exactly. It's not exactly like something that's written on the dotted line. Like you don't have to sign a piece of paper and say, "Yeah, I want to touch kids to make great art." It's not how it works. But eerily, it always ends up there, which is quite a shame, to put it
Yes.
lightly. But I mean, it's interesting, especially for Ezra Pound, because I keep wondering about it. I mean, you have this guy, right? And he is so well read. He's incredibly well connected. He's not just talking to kind of poets. He's talking to sculptors. He's talking to painters, and he's
He's
talking to
friends
just
with Picasso. Yeah.
yeah. He's talking to pretty much everyone that is relevant, and even people who are not as relevant. But he's kind of like how I view him. He's kind of like a talent scout,
Yeah.
and it's interesting to me that this dude who's very well aware of how history works, he has a very strong conception of history. I mean, the cantos, somewhat a lecturer described, because obviously I'm a nerd, so I've watched lectures in my spare time on the cantos, and one of the lecturers described it as kind of Ezra Pound repiecing his own version of history, right? And I thought, yeah, that seems to me to be about right, right? You go from Canto one to final Canto, whatever number that is, and you get a pretty nice detailed outline of how history works and what happened in between.
It's
And
fascinating.
you get this dude, and fascism comes around. And but then again, it's about what type of fascism he's subscribed to, because there's different types of fascism. There's obviously a philosophical fascism by Giovanni Gentile, and then there's Mussolini. Now, I am not well read enough to actually say if he read Gentile, but my opinion is that he did read Giovanni Gentile, and if anyone knows, the stuff Gentile was talking about is like universes, galaxies apart from what Mussolini was doing.
Hmm.
Like it's really weird that it ended up going into where it was. Like it's the fascist manifesto is really really complicated. I don't actually agree with its viewpoint, and I don't think it's very useful as a bit of philosophy. But it's still strange that it went where it did. But that's not the point. Is you have this Ezra Pound guy, and like I said, he knows about what went wrong in history and what kinds of people, what archetypes were doing the bad things throughout history. And then he dare I say, if there's ever a term like that, he joins the bad guys. That is to say, he becomes a fascist and an anti-Semite. And for me, it's a very kind of, it's a lack of nuance from a very nuanced individual. Like this is a
Yeah.
guy who's very, very involved in the classical philosophies, really niche stuff, even that most people haven't heard of. and also Confucius, Taoism. He's involved in all of this.
Yes.
Very nuanced. He's a very nuanced individual, and his kind of political take, which he unfortunately ended up making his main thing, is there's really a lack of nuance. He essentially says, he has a couple of radio broadcasts and essentially says, I'm going to put it bluntly, Jews are the problem. That's what he says, and it's very strange. It's very strange for me.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm giving what I think is my understanding of how Pound's life worked is he was also a very emotional individual. Okay, so in the war he loses a lot of great friends. So he is one of those people that comes out. He doesn't participate in the war, but he comes out and is very disillusioned with the
Yes.
state of things. And he is he might not want to admit it. It's a bit like Hemingway. Like a lot of people don't think Hemingway is a very emotional dude. They both are. Ezra Pound is
Oh yeah.
incredibly emotional. He's like the kind of archetype of the bard. I mean, that's what he wants you to believe. He feels greatly about things. Um, and so I think that kind of emotionalism kind of conquered him and
Mhm.
just led to this kind of finger pointing. That's what I see it as anyway. This kind of finger pointing where it's like obviously he's incredibly affected by the loss of all of his friends, brilliant artists. He loses great friends that he was very close to, and it affects him so much that he has to point the finger. And it's weird because as you can see, the emotions override the knowledge. It's like St. Paul says, knowledge puffs up, because it's easily conquered by something like emotion. It's a bit like Faust, right?
Yeah.
Faust, for example, is Mr. Know-it-all, right? And
Yes.
his emotions conquer him and he makes a terrible decision. So I think what is more important is you get these figures, like you say, these incredibly intelligent and complex figures who are very nuanced, but they're also very emotional. They have to be, right? Because they're
Yes.
poets and they're writers. Cormac McCarthy, he has this kind of standoffish, omniscient narrative prose.
Hmm.
Dude, shut the fuck up, okay? We know this. We know Suttri's about you, Cormac,
Yeah.
okay? Don't try that, okay? We know Suttri's about you, bro. It's
Hmm.
okay. It's okay. But like these are all people that feel greatly. Like you said, it's a necessity that you have to feel really, really deeply about things. And
Hmm.
when with that emotion, I mean, it's kind of like I said, it is that kind of contract written in blood, right? Because you want to become a great artist. Okay, well, you need to feel really deeply about things that interest you or that affect you, in your opinion, right? And if you do, there is always the danger of you being conquered by that same energy, and
Yeah.
that, as we know, can lead to very, very bad paths. But for example, it can also lead to incredibly noble paths.
Oh, absolutely.
That there's plenty of right. I mean, obviously, the people I think that are unhinged, and again, there's a lot of unhinged people that I think didn't really contribute anything negative to society. I mean, you'll know more about him than I do, but there's Rilke. I mean, Rilke is certainly out there.
Oh, absolutely. Rilke was
Does
deeply
he
sensitive. Yeah.
does he kind of go? Does he become a fascist? Does he end up, touching kids? I mean, does he?
Um, he was semi-fascist for sure, but it doesn't really bleed through in his poetry, in my opinion. Um, but he has this mystical transcendence, right, within his
Yeah,
poetry.
yeah,
And if you're not deeply sensitive to yourself and the world and the ways
mm,
you interact with the world, you're not going to have that.
yeah,
I think another good counterexample is Simone Weil, right?
mhm,
Um, who was a deeply spiritual and thoughtful and sensitive thinker, but she promotes this beautiful philosophy and lifestyle. And she was more of a philosopher than a poet. But she had the same depth as any of the great artists we're talking about, um, without falling to the dark side of it.
yeah.
Um,
Um, yeah, that's another good point as well because I don't even know what I was going to say there. Please continue.
Yeah, no, I think nuance is very interesting, and it's kind of a hallmark of the poet. Like I've had this opinion that being a poet, like sure, you can write poetry, you can write verse. It's more about living poetically, and then actually the craft of poetry. And
Yeah.
the craft of poetry is important. I'm
Mm,
very concerned with it if you want to be effective as an artist, but to live poetically is more of a spiritual endeavor, in my
mhm.
opinion. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
Finding attunement with the self and the world, and that requires sensitivity. Like
Yeah.
Pound was a poet, McCarthy was a poet, and they had their complexities and their failings, obviously.
Yeah. But then I suppose the other thing as well, it's like there's a lot of controversial writers, but then what do you mean by controversial? Or there's a lot of writers that are extreme. It depends on what you define as extreme. I know a lot of people that when I tell them about some of the Christian desert fathers who did write poetry, they'd say these guys are insane. These guys are extremists. And it's like, dude, they're chilling in the desert. They're just praying and fasting and helping people. Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
they are spiritual extremists, you know, like they take the matter of the spirit into
Mm,
incredibly great importance. And I think that's almost something better to vie for. That's why I think there's a lot of great people that have done political art, but it's not for me. And I think you can understand why. I'm a very
yeah.
emotional guy. It's
Hmm.
very easy for me to get emotional about certain stuff, and I would much rather actually kind of take a step back and become almost a cultivator rather
Yeah.
than a deconstructivist.
Absolutely. I think that's, you know, not only wise, just knowing
mm,
yourself, but it's more noble calling. Like
mm,
politics is so temporal and so fleeting.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and if you can establish a baseline of, you know, something like you're doing that's more spiritual, more focused
mm,
on your, fundamental beliefs in the way
mm,
you live, that will resonate to a shallower political end. Um, and I don't want to get into the politics and art conversation
mm,
per se, but I do call politics a shallow act because it is not fundamental to how we live. Um, and there are people are going to be upset with me for saying that, but there are more important things to be concerned about prior to arguing about politics or what is political or not. But
yeah.
I digress.
Mm,
One thing I would also like to ask you about
mm,
is your use of symbolism and reference in poetry. And a
mm.
specific example I was reading through your poems the other day. I can't remember which one it was, but you write the mind, body, spirit. And we have a trinity there. And you were very clever with it. You put it in a structural trinity with indentation. Um, can you tell me more about the power of the Trinity to you and how you utilize that in your poetry? Would you say it goes further than that? Is it always on your mind? Um,
Well, the concept of the Christian Trinity, I'll be the first one to say it didn't make sense to me for a long time. It's not an easy thing. And if you were to say, Bence, could you describe the Holy Trinity for me? I would say, no, please don't rely on me, okay? Because I'll probably end up committing some new kind of heresy, right? That hasn't existed before. It's a very hard thing to explain. It's an even harder thing, I think, to grapple with. But that's what actually drew me in. So I was already in the deep end, dare I say, with Christianity, but this lack of understanding actually with certain stuff is actually what drew me in more. Um, I was always under the impression that there is that I had a kind of draw, a kind of magnetism. I was magnetized by the stuff I didn't really know or the stuff I couldn't really reach. Those were the things that excited me and that made me feel a lot. It's a bit like if like I can write an essay, it's a bit like essay writing actually. Essay
Okay.
writing for me comes relatively easily. There's not really that much of a nuance that I can experiment with. I don't really care for it that much. In all
Yes.
honesty,
Yeah,
academic essay
I
writing, I
understand.
don't care for it that much. Outside of it, I think essay writing has a brilliant future and needs to be cultivated a lot more. But for example, because I understand it to a great deal about what gets me good marks for a university essay, it doesn't really excite me. I couldn't care less about it. But poetry, well, now that's one of those things which I won't define. A lot of these people will say, like an icebreaker in a poetry course in uni is like, what does poetry mean to you? Stop. Like you're ruining the whole thing.
Yeah,
Please don't impose any kind of linguistic limitations on something that shouldn't be limited, really. That's a beautiful thing about poetry. And I guess I've just kind of created a paradox because I have kind of defined it without defining it. But the Holy Trinity has this kind of effect on me where it is on my mind a lot, as in, and it has been on my mind a lot during a critical phase in my Christianity. So I've kind of progressed beyond that because it made sense for me because I was always asking. I realized I was kind of asking a lot of questions about, but I was essentially asking the same questions about, and it ended up making sense for me to stay in. And that doesn't say that I just kind of blindly trust what I don't know. A priest was very kind of them to kind of take me through it and explain it to me. And obviously online there's brilliant sources for how the Christian conception of the Trinity works, and it made sense for me to not go beyond it, for me to have a vague outline. Like when you see a figure in the mist, you don't see it in its totality. That's kind of how I see the Trinity, and I don't want to see it any clearer than that.
I
For me,
understand.
that's the Trinity in its beauty.
Hmm.
About the different dynamics, the different functions of each Godhead. That this is what makes sense for me, and I don't necessarily want to go into it anymore. With and the mind, body, and soul or spirit. Well, that's my belief that when God says, "Let us make man in our image," well, you must think, what is the image of God? Well, it's a Trinity. So, in my opinion, there must be some kind of Trinity within humans themselves. And I actually think big media has done a lot to kind of get people to suppress that idea.
Hmm.
This idea that, so like and this ties into my interest in psychoanalytics and especially Jung. Um, because a lot of propaganda has gone out, in my opinion, against the people who try to kind of communicate an idea of the complexity of the human interior. And I think some institutions have kind of repressed that and kind of dumbed it down. In my opinion, there's a very complex trinity between the mind, body, and spirit. I thought it's almost like a no, I don't even know what that means, but I was going to say something about Descartes because I think he believed that the mind and the spirit were different things, but I'm not 100% sure. Don't quote me on that because I'm not very involved in philosophy or Descartes. But it's very important for me that I realize that there is also a functioning trinity within me, and that I need to do
Hmm.
very different things for each of them to kind of fulfill them. The mind needs different things to what the spirit needs, to what the body
Absolutely.
needs. And because I'm a Christian, I think, well, what's the thing that feeds all three mouths at the same time? Well, it's the word of God. It's God, right? That's, in my opinion, supplies the nutrition, a very different kind of nutrition. But outside of that, what does intellectual exercise look like? What does spiritual exercise? What does bodily exercise look like? And so my kind of aim throughout my life is to hone all three at the same time, to hone and find out and kind of exhaust bodily exercise, bodily training to its limit, the psychological training. What is there that can strengthen the mind, a will? What is there that can do that? And what is there that can strengthen the spirit? And ultimately, the question that strings all three of those together: what can I do that turns off this trinity, the body, mind, and spirit, back to God, so that my trinity is at all times in connection with the energies of God? And I'll sound like an orthodox there because I'm talking about the energies of God. But I actually really respect the orthodox. And I'm like pretty much this close to actually being an orthodox. A lot of people are confused because they think I am orthodox, but I'm not. But yeah, that's what I would think about that Trinity, which you saw in one of my poems. It's a very very important kind of. I don't want to say it's innovative. I certainly think there's many people that think this, but in different modes. But it's one of those things which is very it's a very personal belief, and I understand completely if people want to say, well, you know, it's not true. It sounds stupid. It's okay. You know, I think it's very important. I think it's very important that people realize this Trinity and how that is in communication with the Holy Trinity. I think it's very important.
Wow, that's fascinating. That's yeah, really enlightening.
Mhm,
I'm glad you were able to talk at length about that.
mhm,
Because I certainly, yeah, see it arising in your poetry. Um,
mhm,
and yeah, fascinating. I think I really understand um, on the basis of the individual, mind, body, spirit. Yeah, those are
mhm,
all absolutely distinct things that you need to
mhm.
recognize and treat carefully. Because you're not going to receive, mental stimulation and bodily stimulation and spiritual stimulation from the same source. You're just not.
Mhm.
Um, and a lot, I mean, media wants you to, the modern world really wants you to, apply yourself to a very distinct set
Yeah, it
of,
wants to flatten it. Like if
it
I'll be a
wants
bit
to,
more nuanced in my
yes,
point, it wants to
yes,
flatten it and say there's one thing that supplies nutrition to all three things at the same time. And I think that's
yes,
just like if I'm gonna be really for real with you, Simon, it is one of the biggest is the biggest crock of shit that's ever been shoved down our throats, probably ever. Okay, the
yeah,
fact that one thing supplies all, that isn't the Bible, in my opinion, because in my opinion, the Bible is a transcendental thing, and the
yeah,
Word of God is a transcendental thing. But what's really harmful, in my opinion, is that the media wants you to think worldly things just supply all the nutrition, all of it, you can get from the world. Dude, bullshit. Okay,
yep,
no,
yep,
no,
yep. That's the repercussions of the
yeah.
Enlightenment, really. In
Mm-hmm.
my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
it's flattened everything. A term you could call people flatlanders. Like you have a bunch of people that adhere to this. They're flatlanders. They're not transcending. They're not going beyond. And for me, a great way to do that is through deep connection with poetry. I think um, I'm not gonna speak too closely about religion, just because I'm not an authority on any one religion. But I think deep reading and connection with any sacred text will allow you some transcendence, allow you that transcendence. And it does depend on your personal beliefs. The Bible, I think, infinitely useful. Useful is a flat word for it. Um, Valuable is a better word. You can attain the same, maybe not the same, depends on your personal beliefs, but the Tao is a great option as well. Confucianism. Um, but there's so many activities that you can do to obtain this that are stifled in the
Yeah.
modern world, and like you're programmed to have skepticism towards these things, oftentimes in an irrefutable way,
Mm-hmm.
and that mental barricade is pretty critical in my opinion to overcome. Like skepticism is all right, it's valuable, but it can't be what dominates your life in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I think the postmodern objective went wrong. It's all about skepticism and
Yeah.
deconstructionism. Um, and
mm,
that isn't useful to being a human being
mm,
functioning in a real world,
mm,
where you have to consider life and death and your spirit. Um, so yeah, I think I'm glad you were able to speak about that because
mm,
it feels important to your poetry and it resonates when I'm reading it.
mm.
Um, Another thing I would like to talk about is your approach, maybe more at a craft level, when you're drafting and finalizing poetry. How do you feel about the incorporation of symbolism and references um, within your work? Because oftentimes people are very blatant about it and it comes off poorly. Um, Even in good poets, like I was reading Kenneth Rexroth the other night,
Mm.
and he pretty just clearly names a lot of mythology and references. And oftentimes that can feel like an author's being clever instead of attuning with something. So how do you overcome that?
I like the analogy of the mist that I used earlier, so I'll
Mm-hmm.
use it again. I think my what interested me always about poetry. I mean, the poem that got me into poetry, which made me kind of sit down and actually write my first poem, which is actually not that long ago, was William Blake's The Tiger. Um, I read that poem and I said, okay, I want to write a poem, and I did. And when it comes to symbolism, I think the whole point of symbolism is that it does have to be obscure. And if it is, and if the symbol is clear, then I think it has to be obscured by the poet. I think that's when it becomes really effective.
Mm-hmm.
It's so I'm kind of stealing a little bit from Hemingway's own iceberg theory, where I would actually like people to see, because I always like a double entendre. That that is to say, I like to give you maybe a beautiful image, but actually has a lot of weight. And for example, what I like to do is I actually love kind of amputating myths. That's what I like most. I like amputating myths.
All right.
It's really fun. For example, in the last poem I wrote, I'll give this away. One of the lines in there, I think, is a bee hovers over the child in the a bee or a bee stings the child in the night's cradle. Like that is me, first of all, kind of conjoining, but also amputating two separate poems into not poems, sorry, two separate mythical illusions, which is Eros and Thanatos. Because obviously Eros, the son of Aphrodite, was stung by a bee when he was a kid. And Thanatos is said to have been raised in the cradle of night. And so when the bee is trying to sting the child in night's cradle, it's almost like Eros and Thanatos is being conjoined together, right? And so, like I said, you get all of this from me kind of truncating a line. And what I also like on a really base level, because when I started poetry, I had really kind of simple, and I don't think there's anything wrong with actually maintaining really kind of clear, simple goals for your poetry. But one of my clearest goals in poetry was that I want to work the reader. I want to give intellectual stimulation, right? And how I want to do that is I want to make the reader think. So I want to make the reader work. And I'm thinking and I'm feeling like I am truly getting to that stage now,
Yeah.
where because I have developed this really nice method of cutting the right limbs off certain images, the certain symbols that have existed in really distant mythologies. So what I also I'm hollering about is the need for a personal mythos in your work. Blake is one of the best that does it. But what I mean is in how I work a personal mythology is I read a lot of mythology. I read a lot of psychoanalysis. Well, I try to anyway listen to more because unfortunately I'm not well enough ingrained yet in the world of psychoanalysis, but I'm getting there. I like to read a lot of that stuff, and I like to read a lot about different mythologies. So, for example, I was looking at the myth of Prometheus and how that varies from culture to culture, And lo and behold, certain African cultures have this myth about a possum that steals fire on its tail. So
Hmm.
what did I do? Obviously, I wrote a poem called Possums Beneath Prometheus, which conjoins this with the biblical story, biblical character, I should say, of John the Baptist, Saint John the Baptist. And so these three things, again, this is the Trinity again, is heavily ingrained in the subconscious, as you can tell.
Obviously,
These three
yeah.
things flow together really beautifully.
Hmm.
Because what you end up getting is you don't end up getting a purely Western perspective, which has been exhausted really. And I'm not hating on the Western perspective. I actually love it. Because obviously well, if I'm Western or Eastern, I'll save that for another topic of discussion. But it ingrains the Western with Eastern, African, sometimes even oceanic myths. And then obviously I tie in the Bible and it gives it a really nice backbone. And these kind of different symbols from different parts around the world help create what a lot of people have been saying, this primordiality, right? This thing which, okay, Bence, your poetry feels primordial, feels
Hmm.
ancient. But that's because it's not just working with a singular source of pre-modern texts. It's working with a lot, right? It's working with 1 minute ill, and I think that's what I'm really trying to hone is the kind of transitions between this, make them really clean, beautiful. What I love is a kind of monism. That is to say, one idea starts something and then that branches it into a million different things. That's something I love. And so symbolism for me is greatly important because I want my poetry to do the heavy lifting beneath the surface. I want them on the surface to be really beautiful and to make you kind of think and to reread it. But then below the surface, if you can access it, I want it to be a lot of value.
Yes.
And I have this kind of work and reward ratio set out for the reader where it's like, yeah, I am asking a lot of you, but if you do it, if you just give me your attention and you just maybe look up a couple of things or you think maybe for a couple of minutes, I'm gonna give you something and it's gonna change you. And I'll guarantee you that, right? And I think, but that also comes from I think a poet that uses symbols well is a poet that is also deeply, deeply affectionate with his readers, his or her readers, right? I don't think a poet that writes, for art's sake, can access that. And I'm going to get a lot of hate for this from the aesthetics,
Yeah.
the aesthetes. They're going to hate me for this because they'll say, there's great aestheticians that work symbolism really well. But for me, it's people like William Blake, it's people like Pound that are able to come into contact with the stuff below the surface. And those for me, and for my tastes, welcome to disagree, they do it best. And I think there's a certain kind of respect for the reader where I don't think you're stupid. I genuinely don't think you're stupid. A lot of people have different perspectives on me. I actually don't think the modern reader is stupid. I actually think there's a lot of potential for the modern reader. I was talking to a friend yesterday. Shout out to Eros, dude is called Eros. Very, very bright future as both poet and a kind of neurologist, psychologist, whatever he wants to do. He's a great man. I'm very happy to be in conversation with him. He was telling me, well, I was telling him actually, you look at the look, I mean, this is a very strange digression, but let's do it. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Look at the looks maxing culture, right?
Okay.
My friend loves the looks maxing culture because he finds it so funny. Like
Yeah.
it's incredibly funny that some people take this like dead seriously. And I get a good chuckle out of it also. And he took me over. I didn't notice there's a looks maxing website.
Is there
There's a
really?
forum. There's a forum where looks maxers talk to each other. It's crazy, right? But if you read, I mean, it's an incredibly toxic community. It's like,
I'm sure that must be.
dude, it's like you get these like 12-year-old kids that'll take a selfie of them. It's like, am I cooked? And then this like 30-year-old dude is like, yeah, you're cooked, bro. You need to rope max. And I'm like, what is going on? And
Brutal.
it's brutal. But what you see there is that like, I'm not gonna be the one to say it because I'm not well educated on the topic. But in my opinion, it's like a lot of pseudoscience. But these people research like long hours. They spend a long hours researching this stuff about Canfal tilt, Hunter eyes, true cell and Chad, and what these different, how you differentiate means different things, and like I'm looking at that and I'm like, dude, if these people that are saying the modern reader doesn't want to put in effort, like they don't want to put in effort for literature yet.
Yeah.
Like imagine if you can connect with some of these people, they're gonna give you hours of attention,
Hmm.
right? It's what I was saying on one of my lives. Yeah, the attention span is cooked. However, this is what you have to work with, and you have to build the reader up. You can't just be like mean spirited and just kind of like fuck the modern reader. They're stupid and they have zero attention span. I don't think that's gonna work. I think you have to kind of work with them. Like have a sit down, right, and imagine yourself reading your poetry to a dude with 2 seconds of attention span. Can you grab their attention? If you can, like, this is what I mean. If you can grab someone's attention that has a 2 second attention span, like, imagine what you're going to be able to do when you build them up, right? I know countless people that after the Wendy Goon video got involved in Cormac McCarthy, right? And it's not really the same thing, but I'll explain it anyway. Random dude made an 8 hour long video about Blood Meridian. And yeah, it wasn't the best rundown. But look at how many views that video has. Okay. It's got millions of views. 8 hours. Okay. And what that led to is then Cormac McCarthy, because I saw a correlation, and there's probably people out there that will disprove this, but I saw a correlation between that video and Cormac McCarthy books appearing in bookshops. I wasn't able to get a Cormac McCarthy book for a long time,
Huh.
purely from a bookshop. I had to order Blood Meridian from online. And then I went into Waterstones one day. I was like, what? Cormac McCarthy books? What is going on? They got brand new covers. What is going on? There's new attention that's being given to it, right?
Yeah.
Because there's almost the 8 hour long video served as an initiation. I know Ian doesn't necessarily like the Vendigoon video, but I think it's great because it works fantastically as a funnel, and it funneled millions, right? And that's
Yes.
what I mean. Those people that have watched the Vendigoon video, like, they're not the people that are. And I say this with all the respect. I'm a nerd. They're not that Cormac McCarthy lit nerds, right? They weren't them who are going to look up archons and demiurge and gnostics. They didn't begin like that. However, they went down a rabbit hole and said, fuck, this Cormac McCarthy dude goes hard. I love this dude. And I think that's a beautiful thing. I actually
Hmm.
think, and this is why I say, this is the best time to exist. I would not exist in any other time period as a poet. I don't want to. This is the time period when I want to exist as an artist. This is it, right? In my opinion, and I'm going to die on my sword here, this is the climax, right? We've had 2,000 years, 2025 years of build-up, and here we are. We are not climbing, we are at the peak of Freytag's triangle of tragedy. Everything after us is downhill. Okay,
Mm.
we are the climax. And if the sun implodes tomorrow, then we were the last generation of writers, right? That's what I think. And I think my opinion is I want to lift the current reader up because I love the current reader. I want to hug. I want to just take the current reader. If the current reader was an archetype, I would bear hug the shit out of the current reader. Okay, I would break their spine with my embrace. That's how much I love the modern reader. Okay, I see these people, on Instagram comment sections and stuff, and they're fighting over nonsense. And I'm like, these are my people. These are the people I want to read my work.
You want the
I love these
nitpickers.
people. I love these people. Okay. Bring them all to me. I love them. If you don't want them, give them to me. Okay. If they're like doom maxing or black pilled, I don't care. Give me the black pill dudes. Okay. Give me them. Okay. Let me work with them. Okay. Give me my entire life. And I think I'm going to be able to change these people. And I think that's the point
Hmm.
of symbolism, is I think with symbolism, because obviously there's I'm not going to shit on the MFA because I actually think the outline of it is actually kind of good. But that's again, I'll have to expand on that. But a lot of people say the NYC style, the MFA style is shit. And what you see with it is that it's kind of like really staccato. It's not very moving. Sorry, it's not greatly moving to me. It's kind of flat, right? There's not a lot of transcendence. Before people come at me, yeah, there are incredible exceptions. There are fantastic poets out there. However, I want more, and I want even more than more, right? I want more. But I think symbolism can get the job done. I think symbolism is like the vaccine, right? I think good symbolism, and I think the people who respect their audience and the people that love them and want them, right? You have to recognize first and foremost that, I mean, first of all, who are you writing for? Okay, good. That's a different question for what you're writing for, right? That's a very different, two different questions, okay? I'm writing for the people, right? And I know a lot of people will be like, Bence, that's quite contradictory for you to say because your poetry isn't quite accessible. Dude, it's fine, okay? Trust me. People are smarter than you think, right? People are wicked smart. I remember back
Absolutely.
a couple of years ago, bro. I'm not sure if you know about Petscop. There's this game which doesn't even exist, and it's like this creepy pasta online. And bro, that's like if there isn't 50 years of content on YouTube and Reddit and Google combined, there's no content on it, right? There's so much about this random ass game that doesn't exist. You can't play it, and people were just up and just absolutely crazy about it. What did that game do? It used symbolism, right? It didn't treat the audience as stupid. It said, I know that you know. I know that you have access to Google and Chat GPT. So I'm not going to dumb it down. And I actually think a reader appreciates that. I think a reader appreciates that a lot more than if you spoon feed them. Or as we say in Hungary, don't let the cooked pigeon fly into your mouth. You know, like you have to work for it. Okay, I don't believe in spoon feeding the reader. I think what I believe in is I believe in first of all loving the reader, giving them a nice hug, and then pushing them off the side of the cliff, see if they can fly. Right? That's what I believe, and I think that's what works. I think people love that. I think people love it when they don't know, but they don't want to admit it. Right? Because what we said earlier, I think media wants you to know a lot of stuff without knowing a lot of stuff. I want you to not know a lot of stuff so you can know a lot of stuff. That's what I want to do. So yeah, that's what I think is symbolism, and especially references. I think same thing because, like I said, people are a lot smarter than you think. Okay, all they have to do now is if they don't understand the reference and you put it in foreign, they copy and paste it and they can find it, right? And that's the thing. What I don't believe in is I don't believe in building a poem. But I had a friend recently whose poetry I was reviewing, JLG Noga. Shout out to that guy. That guy's really cool. He's cool as shit. I love that dude. And I was reviewing his poetry, and like it's got all sorts of references I didn't know. Right? I didn't know who Du Fu was or who the butterfly lovers were because it's references from another culture that I'm not really ingrained in. I don't know a lot about. I'm not familiar with it. But guess what I did, Simon? I typed in who Du Fu was. I typed in what the butterfly lovers were, right? And I felt a lot better. I was like, this
There you
guy,
go.
this guy doesn't think I'm an idiot. I love this dude. This guy's my guy. I'm gonna die for this dude. Okay, I'll take a bullet for this guy now because he doesn't think I'm an idiot. And that's
Yes.
in line with that. That's what I hear about university. But we can get to that later. But that's what I think about symbolism and referencing. That's what I think.
I love that. Yeah. No, the reader is not an idiot. And your everyday person is not an idiot. People are smart.
Yeah.
And people are really good at making connections.
Mm.
Um, and writers, I notice, um, you know, angsty. upset writers love to fall back on the idea of the masses not being able to understand your work. People don't
Yeah,
understand me. Um, it's not true. People understand you. People think you're either preaching to them or, treating them like they're an idiot. Um,
yeah, yeah,
and if you want to convey complex ideas, you can absolutely do that,
yeah,
but you have to do it with confidence in your ideas and
yeah,
in your imagery. And
yeah.
that's why I love you mentioned Hemingway's iceberg. I
Mhm.
think that's what you're doing every time you create a symbol. Let's
Yeah.
go back to your example of the bee stinging the child in the cradle of night. Like,
Mhm.
that is a powerful image.
Mhm.
For one, that will capture your reader's attention instantly. Like, there's violence there, there's intrigue, there's mystique. Um, and then you start wondering about what those are. Why is that image so captivating? And you look into it further. You're looking into two different myths at the same time.
Yeah.
And it just goes deeper from there because those myths are, I'm not familiar, but I'm assuming they're informed by other history. You're building a whole
Yeah.
symbolic lineage.
And you know what's cool? You know what's even more is
Yeah,
that that is then directly related to a dream I had as a child, and I'm not
there you go.
expecting you to know that, but it's got that energy. It's got the energy that I'm
Mhm,
familiar with the symbol. That maybe I've slept with the symbol a little bit.
mhm,
Like I
mhm.
know the symbol. It knows me. I am the symbol. The symbol is me. Right.
You're
And
connecting with your own subconsciousness through that poetry, and that
it
connects to
comes
the reader.
across. It
Yeah.
comes across that like I
Mhm.
know instantly when a dude is just kind of throwing in, roses are red, violets are blue. I don't think roses are red, violets are blue is actually a bad poem. I just don't think it's used with the right amount of subconscious symbolism. Okay, people just kind of
Absolutely.
throw roses are red in there. What's the rose? What does the rose mean to you? That sort of thing. If I had to give advice to people about helping them go about creating their own mythologies, it is about reading a lot of myths and a
Hmm.
lot of psychology and whatever media even. Watch films, right? Watch good films, definitely. Read good books, but then say, okay, what do I, Bence, Adok, second born of the Adok family, youngest in the family, what do I think of this? Right? What do I think of a possum symbolizing a Promethean figure? What's my take on it? Right? And then I'm also going to throw that in the mix, right? And I think that's important as well. So that you're not just kind of, you are in conversation with the people who are dead, right? You're talking to dead people, but you're also bringing something new to the conversation, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a living lineage.
Yeah.
And that's the beautiful thing about poetry and literature in general, I think. You're
Yeah.
always in conversation with
Mm.
millions of other authors, and many of them you don't even know.
Mm.
But you're still communicating with them. And the reader who is adept and who is intelligent and who has read things that you haven't probably,
Yeah.
they are able to make vastly different connections even than maybe you might have seen
Yeah.
in your own writing, which is
Mm.
really powerful. Um,
Mm.
and yeah, that's the power of symbology and reference.
Of course.
Like in my own poetry,
Yeah.
um,
I was
I would
just
not
gonna
have.
say, I
Yeah,
was just gonna say, I'm talking to the astral poet himself. You
yeah,
know, I love your symbology. For example, if I had to give an example, right? You wrote that poem. Forgive me, I don't know the title of it, but it was using a specific image from Gravity's Rainbow, right?
yes.
You
Pinpricks.
know which one I'm talking. There you go, exactly.
One phrase from Gravity's Rainbow.
Right, monism. That's what I'm talking about. Monism, right? Using that one image, but then also, like I was reading it, dude. I've not even read a syllable of Pinch On. Okay, but I still love your poem. How does that work? How does that work? Doom a poet. How does that work? I'm because I as far as it goes, I'm actually fairly underread. Like people are way more well read than I am. Which, as you said, what happens is people are gonna start talking about all sorts of different cool shit in your comment section. They'll be like, "Yo, Bence, I see you were integrating the Kabbalah, dude. I've never even looked at the Kabbalah,
Oh man,
but
you got it.
thank you, but
Kabbalah's
thank you.
crazy. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I loved about your poetry. Like War is God, right? That poem which blew you up. Again, most people will have read Blood Meridian, but you gave something else to that one quote, which Blood Meridian didn't have, right? So you were talking to Cormac McCarthy, right?
Hmm.
the dead man, you dug him up from the grave and you sat him down um in your student flat and you said to him, war is God, yes? And he said, yeah, war is God, blah, 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 blah. And you said something else. That's just interesting
Absolutely.
about this kind of active kind of symbology. It's not a kind of passive one where it's like, oh, Carl Jung said, this symbolizes that, okay, thank you, Jung. I'll take it from here.
Yep.
Okay. You know,
Yeah, you mentioned dreams, and I was like, oh, he's a Jungian, isn't he? Um, but it's so important. Yeah,
unashamed Jungian. I don't care.
you shouldn't be ashamed of being a Jungian. I haven't read Jung in a long time. I read Religion, Psychology, um, once, but I haven't reached the Cornerstone works. So I think you're inspiring me too. It's on the bookshelf. Um, but yeah, yeah, you have to look at um, what writers are, contributing to your psyche and your poetic creation. Um, and then what are you adding to that yourself? That's so important as a writer to recognize that so you can lean into it and so you can allow it to flourish, I think.
Mm.
Um, because, I was thinking about that a lot. Like I read this poet, this American poet called Jory Graham. Um, I don't want to say anything mean about Jory Graham, but so I'm gonna temper myself on my comments here. She
Fuck
really,
Jory Graham.
yeah.
Sad for you.
Um I was just gonna say she's the most cliche MFA looking poet I've ever seen. But but reading her poetry really changed my outlook on the craft and how I formatted and utilized punctuation, especially. It made me start thinking about that more deeply. And where am I even going here? But all of that builds into your own poetry, right? And you can
Yeah.
use that differently. Like you're taking tools from other writers, you're taking images and you're reformatting them into something that's more powerful to who you are. And
Mm.
since they aren't modern, you're able to reformat that for the modern reader. Um,
Mm.
Even if people say it feels ancient or primordial, um, it's not. It's current. It's living right now. Um, and your modern reader, they're in tune with this, even if they don't know it. They're gonna be able to connect with that.
Yeah.
And I think you're doing that
Mm.
excellently. Um,
Thank you.
yeah. Um, I love the conversation about symbolism. Um, really quickly, I'd like to talk about the poetic process for you. So for my poetic process, I have to be reading, or I cannot write a poem, and I have to be outside, or I cannot write a poem. Um, and when I do write a poem, it is very spur of the moment. Like I just write 2 pages in Moleskine, and that's the poem. And then I go back the next day, type it up, print it out, revise, um, which can either be very extensive, it can be tinkering. Oftentimes, I find myself writing a poem and hating it, and then going back, writing another poem, hating that, and then like a day later, merging the two, and it's wonderful. Um, so my process is a lot of drafting and then some revision um, toward a final product. I'm curious about your process because you're writing much more, I'd say, epic poetry than I am, with a lot more direct intellectual influence than I am, in my opinion. Um, so I'm curious about your drafting process and your revision process. Is it more, well, I'll let you speak on.
Yeah, I mean, so it's different because as you said, I do have like my 500 line poem
Yes.
took me 4 months because it was kind of like when I say 4 months, it was actually more like a year because I wanted to write
Oh,
a
wow.
poem explaining myself to the people and what I how I see myself in relation to my country. Um, and I wanted to write about it. It was originally going to be called Narrative, the Last Son of Adok. And it was going to be written in the style of, not sure if you know the hip hop artist Big Pun, which is one of my favorites. And it was going to be written in that style. And I ended up watching, and so I'd been thinking about, but I felt like I wasn't ready enough to write it. And then, like I said, the 4 month stage, which is what I kept saying, I say it's 4 months because it was 2 months of me kind of saying, okay, you know what, let's write this self portrait. Let's write a self portrait, and um, it was 2 months of me kind of looking through my dream journal, analyzing the dreams, noting down more dreams I had, analyzing that, analyzing my character, my decisions in the past that I felt have lingered. So, for example, when as Yeats would put it, when I wooed a proud woman, not kindred of my soul, that's an important event. And I'd like to analyze that in a great deal, analyze kind of what I think of myself in relation to my country, in relation to God, how I see myself as a Christian. I was analyzing all of this, which took me obviously throughout the entire 4 months I was doing that. And it wasn't always the most pleasant process, but because it wasn't pleasant, I loved it a lot.
Hmm.
Um, and I had written a long poem in 2 parts, which was called "The Child Who Had Not Felt the Warmth of the Village," which is from an African proverb,
Okay.
and that was going to be autobiographical, or is it biographical? I always confuse it too, but
Autobiographical for yourself. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, if
yeah,
it's
for
about you,
myself,
yes.
yeah, because author, okay, yeah. So it was going to be autobiographical, and it was going to be really the symbolism was going to be heavily inspired by African myth, but then I've essentially started taking little lines from that which I liked. There were some really cool lines I didn't, which I ended up using for other poems, um, which aren't available to the public yet. And so I was constructing this large poem from a very kind of sparse outline, and then I was adding little chunks on, and the little chunks on were coming. Okay, I had this dream where I was an infant. This was when I was 6. I had a dream when I was an infant, and there was a large wasp hovering over me, and there was
Mm.
also a red light. So that is very, very important. So then I was also thinking about, you know, when I was a child in Hungary, and we did after the market crash. We didn't have enough money to pay for the lights, to pay for hot water, so we had to boil a kettle, and then from the pan or from the pot, pour it into the bathtub. And then I remember when I had a cold, and a particularly bad cold, and I was submerged into freezing cold water to chill down the fever.
Oh,
And so
wow.
these are things which were kind of powerful things which stay with you.
Hmm.
And so then I was also kind of psychoanalyzing myself, which was more or less pleasant. I was essentially saying, my infatuation with praying in the dark is most likely affected by my childhood, wherein we didn't have light because we couldn't
Fascinating.
it.
Yeah.
But it took a great bit of brutal honesty, but then
Mm.
also about my kind of ambition and the fact that I do associate myself in the lineage of not a European country, because I do not think that Hungary is a European country.
Mm.
That, in my opinion, is propaganda. But that I could talk for possibly a whole podcast about that. So I also wanted to include that, which was why I was drawing on some Chinese kind of zodiac symbols, which is actually the same zodiac chart that Hungary uses,
Oh,
which is why I
fascinating.
say that spiritually, philosophically, actually, we're more European, but spiritually, Hungary is a very Eastern country.
So
In my
interesting.
opinion, in my opinion,
Yeah.
and then I was also looking at myself and thinking about my grandfather who died in prostate cancer, and then I was
Mm.
thinking, I had some lines in there that I deleted about how I do believe that I will also die of prostate cancer because it runs
Mm.
in the family. So I was also dwelling on that. And then this other recurring dream, subconscious desire, I suppose, to die at 33 years of age,
Mm,
which I've
okay.
seen, which seems to be popping up quite often in my subconscious in dreams. So I was dwelling on all of these things. And so this poem kind of came together with this sparsity in the backbone, and I was feeding all of this information and then my kind of viewpoints, and then also stylizing all of that because I did want this to be a highly stylized poem,
Yeah.
which kind of embodied what is me. If I'm going to write a self portrait, it has to be in the style of Bence Adok, and I would say I'm quite proud of that poem, and that
Yes.
I do think is truth. I think it's very truthful to what I think about myself. That I do associate myself as being in the lineage of the Huns, and not necessarily. I don't associate myself to be in a lineage of Christian people, because
Mm,
many people in Hungary who are Christian do have an element of paganism. It's just how Eastern Europe works. Paganism and Christianity is there's plenty of overlap, especially in Hungary. I can't talk for other Eastern European countries, but I do associate myself with this barbaric background,
mm,
which is why I also advocate for literary barbarism. And so this was a kind of a special case, but it took a long, long time because I wrote the 4 parts and then I was editing and I thought, I'm really happy with part one. Let's go to part two. Very happy with part two. Rewrote part three. Uh, Not as strong. Okay, let's go. Part four. I'll rewrite part three. Part four, less happy than with part three. Okay, you know what? Let's not bother. Let's go all the way back to part one, re-edit everything. Very meticulous.
mm,
Uh, and then obviously I start adding in sections of translation, just randomly embedded within the poem. There's a
mm.
translation of a section from Beowulf,
Okay.
but then
Is that method inspired by Pound?
yes, he does this also,
Yes.
but with Chinese poetry, where he'll actually translate a Chinese poem and then his poem begins after that. But he
Oh,
doesn't tell you, he never says, or he does it actually with this very, I forget, he does it with some Italian poetry also, right, which he translates and then his poem begins after. And you think, because he doesn't tell you that this is a translation. If you have a companion, which I do not have, because I just don't roll like that. But if you have a companion, it will say this is a translation of, right. But then like Pound doesn't think you're stupid, right? So he thinks even if you don't know, it doesn't make that much of a difference because you still see the beauty,
yeah.
right?
It's not necessary to the poem to know, and it shouldn't be, I think, but it
Yeah,
adds depth when you do
yeah,
know, and it
yeah, no,
allows you to
exactly.
explore further.
Yeah. So for my reasoning to include two Old English translations,
Mm,
one Beowulf where he's fighting Grendel's mother, and then I inflect that back upon myself, where Beowulf becomes I, but then Grendel's mother also becomes I,
mm,
uh, which is why you see a lot of indentations on the letter I, the pronoun I in the poem. Um, it made sense because while I am talking about what it feels like to be irrevocably, in my opinion, irrevocably separated from my home country, I am in a country that is of a very different lineage. It's a lineage that I find fascinating.
mm.
The Old English stuff I find really interesting. Um, and the title has great, great meaning when it comes to balancing those two. I won't reveal that. But
Yeah.
like it made sense in the process. When I've been in the headspace, I was writing no other poems in this time for 4 months, and I've just been
Oh, wow.
wake up, read my Bible, sit down, edit Attila's Gaze Through the Pines. Okay, on to the next day, on to the next, and it just seemed kind of endless. And I was obviously asking a few people their opinions on it, and it got to where I finished part five, and I wanted to ask a couple of people what they think of it, and I just thought, look, it's never going to be this thing which like is going to please everyone. It hasn't, as a matter of fact. There's some people that didn't like it. Um, but it feels done. It feels like it's passed through the smithy,
Mm.
right? It's
And
been
that's what's
through the
important.
process.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I've tested it, I've bent it, and it's not broken.
And you're not
It's
here to pander.
no, like I'm active. I am the Dionysian spirit of movement, right? So, was to say that as a joke, but like I am,
Bence goes
I
pagan.
exactly. You're a heretic. Repent. I'm joking. I'm joking. I don't even like the Dionysian cult. I think they're weird, but more or less. But like it, like I've bent it, and the even when I've bent it as much as possible, and I went through a really bad phase of doubt midway
Hmm.
through this, where I thought, look, am I really it? And it's poems like this which made me say, yeah, you know what, I am. You know, it's gonna take a little bit of an ego boost for me to say this, and it's going to possibly intimidate a lot of people when I say this, but yeah, I am the future great. And this poem has proved it because this poem has put me through the fire and I have put it through the fire. And this has made us brothers. I'm conjoined in brotherhood. It's like I've slit my palms with this poem.
Mm.
And so, like you see, I have a very physical relationship with my poetry.
Yeah.
Other
Yeah.
poems, I've had poems where I've closed the door, turned the lights out, drawn the curtains, and just sat in darkness and just kind of was talking to myself,
Yeah.
essentially. I had poems where I randomly stood up, turned on music, started dancing, turned the music off, sat back down, right. Like I have moments of great burst, right? Great spiritual, physical burst. I also have
Yes.
times when I just get angry and I start throwing things about the room. Um, and it's not good for people to be in the room when I'm writing poetry. This is fact. But then there'll be times when what like I also believe in active inspiration, like you said. I'm a lot like you. I
Mm.
either have to be I either have had to listen to a song that impacts me greatly, or I've had to read poetry throughout the writing process as I'm writing, which is impacting me greatly. Like I'm
Yeah.
like you. For example, for months, and still I have a very big infatuation with Beethoven's Ninth
Okay.
Symphony, Ode to Joy. I remember it's not like it's one of the only songs that ever brings a tear to my eye.
Mm.
Andre Rieu, the French, what's he called, maestro, did a brilliant performance of it, where these he has two women, two men standing at the front, and the rest is just a band,
Mm.
and it's really the main bit. It's actually Schiller's Ode to Joy. If I
Yes, I was
don't
just gonna say crazy connection because I'm currently reading
synchronicity,
Schiller's philosophy, and I was
dude.
just talking with a professor who's saying his poetry is in
Yeah,
Beethoven's Ninth. It's just,
that's what I was saying. It's but when you read the poem, it's you know he
hmm.
said, one of the German words I love is Feuertrunken, fire drunk. I love that. I love that greatly. And so I listen to that, and sometimes I'm very much impacted by that song. But that's
Mm.
great because then I can sit down and just kind of, you know, right. And sometimes I'll turn the heating up in my room, close the door for 3 hours, come back in the room, close the door again, and write and sweat, right? And
Mm.
it's a physical process. And
Yeah,
I like kind of bleeding out and kind of having to be. I like feeling exhausted after I write a poem, and I
I love that.
regenerate after. I
Yeah,
regenerate after through prayer, right? I
yeah,
regenerate after through bodily exercise because if you
yeah.
can, as you can see, it's like I give great importance to the idea of four humans in the body. Hippocrates is what he was saying. Except I think if you exhaust your mind and your intellect, you should then also exhaust your spirit and body. Right? That's my opinion. I think these things must exist accordingly so that if you are recovering, you recover well. Like for me, it's impossible to write in stagnation. I
Mm.
would have had
Hmm.
to be like I had a fever a couple months ago and I was bedridden for a couple of days. And I tried to write, and I was like, I found no inspiration whatsoever
Yeah.
because I couldn't work out, I couldn't run, I couldn't pray
Hmm.
with the same kind of intensity that I
Hmm.
like, and I couldn't write with the same amount of intensity. And like I said, I am absolutely in no way recommending this for everyone. I believe this is I found this throughout a process. I
Yeah.
found out through a process that passively writing, chipping away at the computer doesn't work. I have to have felt something great before I write.
Yeah.
And I find it really easy. Like I said, I find it really easy to go into fits of anger or fits of sadness or
Mm.
fits of joy, ecstasy. And it swings and roundabouts. Like one moment I'll feel very sad and I might write a very sad poem, and then I'll find the burst that lifts me up, and I'm able to lift the poem up because of that. But yeah, that would be my artistic process is very careful about also the kind of source material I'm drawing from to maintain my style. Like I
Mm.
don't just want to draw inspiration from everyone. That's why I'm kind of if I read a poet there's one really good poem, I'm like, okay, this is interesting. Like I was like this with Marianne Moore, who great friend of Pound again.
Okay.
Um, and I read one of her poems and I was just astounded. I was like, this is incredible. This is really nice. And so I'm going to read more Marianne Moore and see what that can do for my style. But I don't like to bring people's influences in on my style on a whim. Like I
Yeah.
studied William Blake in school, then I read most, not all, of course, of his complete poems. And okay, now I'm able to kind of channel some of that Blakean energy. I read the cantos and I've read many other Pound poems and his translations. So I'm able to channel that also and also bring myself into it. So that would be my process.
Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful. I love how you connect it to the physical because, yeah, I think the body and the mind inform each other, of course. Um, and being, engaged with your body is a way to experience poetry, whether you're writing or not. It's really important to the creative act. And I find from a slightly different angle, maybe the same thing. I need to go experience nature and experience what my body does in nature to write poetry. Like there's a place near town where I just kind of in the middle of nowhere. I'll
Where
go
is
out.
this, by the way? What state is this?
I'm in Oregon. I'm in Eastern Oregon.
Oregon.
I'm in the
Okay.
desert, the high desert.
Okay.
So it gets chilly and clear. There's not much snow this year, but
Mm.
I'll go out and I'll go look at the sky and I'll look at Orion and the transect of Jupiter. And that's a poem right there every time. It's like
No
it's like
doubt.
yeah,
No doubt.
it's like fishing, right? You go to
Yeah.
a spot on the river, you know there's gonna be a fish, and you catch him.
Mm. Mm.
That's what I'm doing. It's maybe a little cheap, but it works. And it's a commune with something greater.
Yeah.
And
It's
with
not cheap if it works for you.
yeah,
Absolutely not.
exactly.
Mm.
Um, yeah, going outside, doing something physical. Anyone who's seen me post on Substack knows I'm always skiing or climbing or walking around.
Yeah.
And those are the things I'm not writing about skiing. I'm not writing about climbing. Um,
No.
maybe someday I will, but those are directly informing how I envision the world and how I'm
Yeah.
able to create it in a
Yeah.
poem. And I'm sure it's the same way for you. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
you're,
I mean, for me, it's a little bit harder to find spaces of nature because I've always been very urban all my life.
mhm,
I've never much grown up or been raised in a countryside. But
yeah,
then what I do is like I said, I like to create, well, I said this on Ian's podcast, I like to create my pockets of wilderness where I can exist. So, for
yes,
example, I found an absolutely beautiful opportunity for me, only person in my entire church who's a young person, really. And, you know, my priest needs help with work on the garden. Obviously, I'm going to help. And for me, this is very, very important that I'm in the garden in my church at least once a week. And I want to make
mm,
this garden beautiful. It's very overgrown at
yes,
the moment, but I want to make it beautiful. I want to prune, I want to clear the moss off the pavement. I want to trim the grass. I want to uproot the weeds.
Yes.
I want to collect the rubbish. I want to cut down the thorny brushes. I want to plant flowers. I want to do this because I'm not going to make the excuse that it's hard for me to focus because I'm just in an urban environment and there's a lot of noise. Lock in. Okay, I'm in the garden. I'm locked in for
Yes.
greatness. I'm there. I'm literally a hand's reach away from touching the walls of the church. It's powerful stuff. Very
Yes.
powerful stuff. I felt really bad because during the collect, I can't give money out because I'm broke and I have no physical change on me. Techno feudalism. And it's,
Yep.
you know, consequences. I have no physical change. I have no physical
Yes.
money. And I'm not going to an ATM because I'm gonna get stabbed. And that'd be a proper way for me to die. Um,
Mm-mm.
by an ATM. So I'm in there, and this is how I pay the church. This is how I pay the church, and how I can. This gets me in the spirit also. I go to this. I go to the garden maybe once a week to clear some stuff up, or maybe make some. Last week we were clearing the moss off the pavement, and I loved it. Most people would be like, "Dude, it's just moss on a pavement, and you're shoveling it off." Not
Mm-hmm.
very exciting. I'm like, it's not. It's not the excitement. It's the fact. Excuse me. It's the fact that there's green, this patch of green I'm
Yes.
standing on, but not that I'm standing on it. Like Simon, like I'm on my knees and my kneecaps are dirty, and
Yes.
like the fawn is going through my palms and stuff because I
Mm-hmm.
don't wear gardening gloves for whatever reason.
Yeah.
My
Gardening is like,
hands, my
yeah, it's
hands
a
are going through the soil. My hands are going through the soil. I'm
yes.
feeling the soil. This is very important. Very important.
Yes.
And like, but this is it for me. Like, because I don't have a car. I can't go out to the forest. There's not that there's a forest nearby to Manchester. I know how to fish. Not that I've fished a lot before, but scarcely any lakes about. There's not a lot of bodies of water, in Manchester or up the north in Newcastle. Maybe the River Tyne, but you do not want to go fishing there. Trust me. Like I love fishing, but I can't just use that excuse of like I want to write about and connect with something transcendent, but I'm stuck in an urban environment. Sometimes the urban environment is the transcendental for me. That is the medium for me to access it. Like I said, it's the same with the readers. Like I love my readers. I love the people. I also love no matter how like I do hate Manchester. I do hate just seeing concrete and stone, but it's me. Like this, I've grown up on concrete. This is where
Yeah.
I'm from. I'm
Mm-hmm.
never going to be able to sever myself from it. Like I could LARP and just tell you a nice, sweet lie, Simon, and say, I was raised on the great plains of Hungary, where the Huns were riding through, and the Vandals and the Goths before they plundered Rome. Dude, it's not true. Like it's not true. I grew up, like I said, in a flat that didn't have light, didn't have hot water.
Mm.
Then I grew up with my grandmother, and that had a garden, right? That's it. That's it for me. Like you say, and it's good because you are making the most out of your environment. The environment is
Yes.
very important, I think. Also to be in contact with it because, like we say, it's you're in contact with the present moment. You can be 2,000 IQ individual cooped up in the library and write poetry. But like we and or you can be a brilliant formalist. But then people like Walt Whitman will come about and will bother you. No offense. Walt Whitman bodies most of these rational, oversimplifying flatlanders, like we said. He bodies them.
Yes.
Why? Because Walt Whitman made use of his environment. He looked at
Yes.
he was getting inspired from the people about him. Read Song of Myself. I mean, it
Yes.
gets like a little bit like, really, Walt? We're doing this again for the 15th time in the poem. Okay, it's still just as enjoyable when he's talking about the people going from house to house and about, I sing the body electric. Like he's
Yes.
he's he's writing about a dude carrying a haystack on his shoulder. That's him getting inspired. Like he's in touch with his environment. It's very
Absolutely.
important that you're doing what you're doing, and it's important, for people like who may be in my situation who don't have access to a park or a forest or the desert who don't have access to it. It's fine. That doesn't make these people any like further behind than maybe someone like you, right? Because then, for example, you are also technically behind where I am because maybe you haven't experienced the same thing that I have, and that's fine.
Absolutely.
It's perfectly fine. You're using a different way to access the transcendental, and so am I, and so can
Absolutely.
and so can everyone, and
Absolutely.
so should everyone, right? It's the same with the routine. You have to find your routine by yourself. It's just one of those things. It's a bit like the gym. You'll see a lot of dudes online and they're like, buy my course, I'll show you how to get fit. Sure, but honestly, it's better if you just plug away for a couple of years, play around a little bit, obviously stay safe in the gym, don't lift like an idiot, and just find out what works for yourself and what you
Hmm.
want to do in the gym. It's 100% more beneficial than if you go up to the random asshole on Instagram and be like, yo, or chat GPT and be like, yo, give me a training outline. Like, don't do that. Go and just find out for yourself.
Yeah, experience things. Be a person.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you can't reduce poetry. That's
No.
like fundamental. We're trying to expand. We're trying to transcend. That's the whole project. That's the whole point.
Mm-hmm.
And to say that one way of experiencing the world and writing poetry from it is better than another or superior to another is reductive.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're writing, well, you're writing for the same people, but from different
Mm-hmm.
angles.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't presume to say that I have a superior life experience to someone else.
Yeah.
Just it's different.
Yeah.
And I'm able to access a different aspect of reality. And
Yeah.
I learn something every time I read your poetry. I'm sure you can see something that you haven't experienced in my poetry. And
100%. I
that's
feel that I feel the environment that you were saying. I feel it in your poetry. And it's not like
absolutely,
I've never gone skiing. I've never gone skiing. You wrote your winter poems. I haven't finished them yet. I'm gonna give them an actual read through. But like it's there. Like I know it's there. Like you are this is a very personal kind of transcendence, for
yes,
you. I feel it. And that's the beautiful thing about it.
yes. And it's wonderful. And that's partly why I was so intrigued to chat with you.
Mm.
Because we're looking at the same end goal. We're looking at the same light in the distance, but we're on opposite sides of the horizon, right?
Mm.
Um, well, maybe not that extreme, but
Mm.
it's a metaphor that works for me.
Yeah.
And we're communing with the same people with the same earth, um,
Yeah.
just through different ways, and that's wonderful. And that's how a poetic movement and a poetic reality will be effective. Um,
Yeah.
through addressing the vast diversity of poetry and life.
Sure.
And that's wonderful. Um, I don't have any more prompts written down. Is there anything you'd like to say?
Um, yeah.
Hear it.
Like I said, there's gonna be a lot of people that will say you need to do A, you need to do B. And for people go in the comments. I am not talking about Ian because as many of you hate Ian,
Oh
he is not
boy.
doing that. Okay, trust me, he's not doing that. He's not telling you to do something. He's giving prompts. He's sharing ideas, but it's very important to almost go through a process of individuation. I'm going to
Hmm.
sound very Jungian, but individuation as a poet is endlessly fascinating, endlessly important also. Um, and you know, I think you can't study poetry from mere books, mere textbooks. Like you said, Simon, you gotta put that all into practice. You gotta live your poetic style almost, and you know, always be wary, I think, of lesser objectives, lesser aims. There are
Yeah.
lesser aims. Fascism, communism, they're not it, okay? They might seem like it, They're not it. Okay, trust me, they aren't it. Right? Um, it's just not it. Right? There's people that are going to also tell you that the stuff you're doing is wrong. Right? They're gonna say, you know, Simon, nobody gives a fuck. They're gonna say it. I'm gonna say they'll say it probably. So if you, because I think you're gonna get big enough. I think your
Thank you.
poetry's on a really cool path, and
Thank
you're
you.
looking at the right sources, right? You're looking at German Romanticism, really, really good source for especially the type of poetry that you're doing, right? And I think just kind of exhaust that and treat all of the people that don't give constructive feedback as perfect. Unsolicited advice, unsolicited feedback, good, do a little bit jarring, and hating, takedown articles, they're not our world, okay? They are not the poet's world. And
No.
that's fine, okay? It's a lesser medium for lesser people at the end of the day. The poet always knows the, the most efficient output, the most efficient medium to exert energy into for themselves. Like I
Yes.
said, for me, it's the Bible. And I'm trying to kind of put this blessing that God has given into my blood. I'm going to
Yes.
put it into motion. And I think a lot of people are gifted on this platform. I'm actually greatly astounded by the amount of people that are coming up and are progressing, are making really good improvements. I think what's really crazy is that a lot of people, sure, a lot of people will say, they'll subscribe to someone and say, yo, your work is really good, Simon. And it's even cooler if they can see your work a year ago and now and
Yes.
see this kid is moving. He's got motion.
Got
Okay.
motion.
This guy's got motion, he's got direction. Okay. He's going somewhere and it's visible and I can feel it. And that's also something which I just want to tell people, like there are people that will hate your poetry, but there's people that are going to literally love you. They're going to love you because of your poetry. And in that spirit, reciprocate that,
Yeah.
love those people, love those people, and never hate the people that are going to try and, take you down, try and deconstruct your poetry. There's no hatred there. No,
No.
absolutely no hatred for these people.
There's no room for hatred. Non-poetry.
Absolutely not, because hatred, because we're crafting a sword for a different battle, and hatred blunts the iron in the smithy. Don't do that, okay? Positivity is going to move you forward, and forward motion, no retreat, is the most important thing. Always, now and forever. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you for inviting me. I must say this was quite a surprise because I'm a great enjoyer of your poetry, but we haven't talked too much. Although I do love your recommendation on the Odyssey translation, which I
Thank
will
you.
read through. Looks great, looks beautiful.
Yes.
But yeah, very
Yeah.
cool conversation to have on a Friday evening. It's exactly the type of stuff I want to do. Alas, can't do it all the time,
Can't do it all the time.
because I don't have people like you in person, Simon. I
Oh,
can't go into my modernism class and talk to people about Schiller, or German Romanticism. I've got to listen to people hating on Joyce because he dared to believe. Prime example. I was in my modernism class and people were saying this Stephen Dedalus guy's a cunt. He's a he's a prick. He's stuck up, and it's like, why? Because he saw himself as different. It's like, yeah, okay, he's a little bit of an ass, but is that not something admirable in Stephen? I find something so admirable in Stephen that he says, these things, the island Catholicism don't define me. Like I'm on a different path. I think that's respectable. I can respect it. And he's shrugging off, I'm not Catholic, but he's shrugging off my religion. And I can still respect it. And so it's just a little bit disappointing. And obviously, I back my boy Joyce and Stephen. I'll spin the block for Pound also.
Let's
Whoever
go.
whoever's talking down on Pound. I mean, if you're gonna go for his politics, I guess I can't say much. It speaks for itself. But his poetry is great. Leave him alone, okay? We people have took him down enough. But yeah, thank you. This was a very enjoyable talk. I enjoyed it.
So enjoyable. I've learned a lot. I'm so glad you're able to join me. Um,
Of
yeah,
course,
I've been really hoping to get to know you better as a fellow
sure.
young poet, rising
Yeah.
star.
I was just gonna
Um,
ask, what year of university are you?
what year? I'm graduating. I'm in my last term of classes right
Oh,
now.
lucky man.
Yes. And then this spring,
Okay.
I am just going to be doing archaeology. I'm going to get to go to Croatia. So I'll be in your
Ooh,
neck of the woods for not
ooh,
really,
okay. I like that. I like that.
but be in Europe for a little bit to grow my poetry. That is the end
You
goal.
definitely will. You definitely will. Croatia's beautiful. Croatia's a
Yes,
beautiful
I'm
place.
excited.
Um, and it's Balkan. The Balkan geography has incredible aura. So I'm
Okay.
going to say it has immensely powerful aura. I can't wait to go to Serbia and then to go to Romania, obviously to meet up with
Yes.
my man Stefan.
Yes, Stefan.
Actually, so I'm saying, bro, Stefan is the man.
He is the man.
Um, he's involved with some clashes with my boy Ian, and I'm caught in the middle, and I'm like, oh, I love both of you guys. Just
I
stop
love them
fighting.
both. Yeah, just stop
Write
fighting.
poetry. Write poetry instead. Let's not hate. Let's not hate. But yeah, the Balkans is beautiful.
Okay.
I hope you enjoy it. What kind of archaeology are you?
We're digging in caves for Neanderthals. Um, should be
Mm.
interesting. Should be informative.
Ooh,
Reminds me.
that's my jive as well. I'm kind of jelly. I'm gonna be honest. I'm kind of jelly right now. Um,
Hey, I'll take you along next time. Well,
so
yes. Yeah.
definitely send me some photos if you can of the caves.
Oh, for sure.
That kind of stuff turns me on than a woman. I'm just saying,
The
But
belly of the earth. That's the stuff.
yeah,
That's the stuff.
The Yonic caves.
The Ionic
Ooh,
caves.
that's what I'm
Yes.
talking about.
That's
Yeah.
what I'm talking about, the
Well,
limestone.
yeah, exactly. Um, Fantastic conversation.
Fantastic. Yes. Thank you. I'll end the recording there.